I am Michael, and tonight, a storm traps two strangers in a remote mountain cabin, and the tension between them is impossible to ignore. The cabin is double booked, and with no way out, desire becomes unavoidable. They spend hours together in the small, secluded space. Heated glances, lingering touches, and quiet moments that pull them closer. By nightfall, surrender becomes inevitable. Desire takes over, and for one intoxicating night, they let go completely, without promises, without expectations, just giving in to what they cannot resist. In this spicy romance story, isolation, temptation, and a night of passion blur the line between curiosity and obsession. The road narrowed as it climbed, curling into the mountains like it was deliberately trying to lose her. Pine trees pressed in from both sides, their branches heavy with snow. The world beyond them, muffled and white. The farther she drove, the quieter everything became. No traffic, no phone signal, no reminders of the city she'd left behind. That was the point. Jennifer Moreau rolled down the window just enough to let the cold air in, sharp and clean, a contrast to the stale stress she'd been carrying for months. The cabin had promised solitude, silence, a reset. When it finally appeared, tucked between towering pines, her shoulders loosened. It was perfect. The cabin looked like something lifted from a postcard, dark wood, a stone chimney, smoke curling lazily into the pale sky. Snow blanketed the roof and clung to the porch railings, untouched except for a single set of footprints leading up the steps. She frowned. Another car sat nearby, dusted with snow but unmistakably recent. Not abandoned, not old. Her pulse ticked faster as she cut the engine and stepped out. Boots crunching against the snow. Maybe the owner was checking something. Maybe. The cabin door opened before she reached it. Evan Cole filled the doorway like he belonged there, tall, relaxed, a mug cradled in one hand, steam rising between them. He wore a dark sweater that looked soft and lived in, sleeves pushed up casually as if this was his space and she was the interruption. His gaze swept over her, not leering, not rushed, just curious, assessing. "You're early," he said mildly. Her irritation flared instantly. "I'm not early. I booked this cabin for the week." A corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile. "So did I." The air between them sharpened. She stepped closer, pulling her jacket tighter. "That's not possible." Yet here we are. He shifted, and she caught a glimpse of the cabin behind him, fire lit, coat draped over a chair, boots by the door, settled, comfortable, infuriating. They compared confirmation, standing far too close on the narrow porch, shoulders nearly brushing as they held their phones out. Same dates, same cabin name, same cheerful booking message. Silence stretched. "Well," he said finally, taking a sip of his coffee, like this was mildly amusing rather than catastrophic. "Looks like someone messed up." "There are other cabins," she said, though she already knew the answer. "Not within an hour's drive, longer with the snow." The wind picked up, cold and insistent, threading through her clothes. She glanced back at the road, already softening under fresh snowfall. He noticed. Of course he did. "Storm's coming," he added. They weren't kidding about that in the forecast. She exhaled slowly, irritation warring with reluctant practicality. Leaving wasn't an option. Staying meant sharing space with a stranger who looked entirely too comfortable with the idea. "I'm not sharing a bedroom," she said. "Wasn't planning on it. Or food." He tilted his head. "I cook. You don't have to trust me, but you'll probably appreciate it." She bristled. "You don't know that." That half smile appeared again. "Give it a day." Against her better judgment and the creeping awareness that standing this close to him made it hard to think, she stepped inside. The warmth wrapped around her immediately. Wood smoke, coffee, something faintly citrus, clean and subtle. The space was small. One living area, a compact kitchen, a narrow hallway leading to 2 bedrooms. Close quarters, no escape. They negotiated territory like wary allies. She claimed one bedroom, he kept the other. Shared kitchen, shared living space, clear rules, minimal interaction, temporary. As she unpacked, she could feel him nearby, moving through the cabin with unhurried confidence. The soft thud of boots, the scrape of a chair. Every sound registered more than it should have. When she emerged again, their eyes met across the room. The look lingered a second too long. Annoyance crackled between them, but beneath it was something else. An awareness she refused to name, a spark she dismissed as irritation. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. Inside, the cabin felt suddenly much smaller, and despite herself, she had the unsettling sense that this unexpected stay was going to test far more than her patience. Jen woke to the scent of coffee. It pulled her from sleep before she was ready, rich and warm, threading through the quiet cabin. For a brief moment she forgot where she was, forgot the storm, muted mountains, the unfamiliar walls, the man in the next room. Then memory returned all at once. Evan. She lay still, listening. The low clink of a mug against the counter, the soft scrape of a chair. He moved with an easy confidence, unhurried, like he had nowhere else to be, like he hadn't been thrown off balance by sharing a cabin with a stranger. She pushed herself up, smoothing a hand over her hair, suddenly far more aware of her thin sleep shirt than she had been a moment ago. Annoyed at herself, she grabbed a sweater and stepped into the narrow hallway. The kitchen was small, too small. Evan stood at the counter, back turned, sleeves pushed up again, forearms dusted with flour. He was cooking. Of course he was. "Morning," he said, without looking at her. She paused. "How did you know?" You walk quietly, he said, turning now, eyes flicking briefly over her face before settling politely on her shoulder, but not quietly enough. That unsettled her more than it should have. She crossed to the counter, keeping a careful distance, and reached for a mug. Just as he did, their fingers brushed. It was barely anything, an accident. But the contact sent a quick, sharp awareness through her, like static snapping between them. Jen pulled her hand back first, heart ticking faster. Sorry, he said, though his voice held no real apology, only interest. She muttered something and reached for another cup. He poured the coffee without asking, sliding it toward her as if he already knew how she took it. She noticed. They worked around each other in silence, passing in the tight space, shoulders nearly touching. Each time he moved behind her, the air shifted, warm and faintly scented, wood smoke, and something distinctly Evan. She told herself she was imagining it. After breakfast, he suggested gathering more firewood before the storm worsened. Practical, sensible. Outside, the cold bit immediately, snow crunching under their boots. They worked side by side, lifting logs, stacking them against the cabin wall. It should have been simple, mindless labor. Instead, she became acutely aware of his presence, how close he stood, how easily he reached for the heavier pieces, how his breath puffed visibly in the cold air. At one point, he passed her a log, their hands overlapping briefly. Too long. Her fingers tingled long after he let go. You don't have to prove anything, he said lightly, noticing her grip tighten. I'm not, she replied, sharper than intended. His smile was slow, knowing. Sure. Back inside, the warmth hit them again, fogging the windows, steam rising from their clothes. Jen peeled off her gloves, fingers stiff, and Evan was suddenly there, close enough that she could feel his heat. Here, he said, reaching for her hands. She stiffened. I'm fine. Your fingers are freezing. Before she could protest, he wrapped them gently in his own, rubbing warmth back into them with slow, deliberate strokes. His touch was firm, confident, and devastatingly attentive. She forgot to pull away. For a heartbeat, they stood like that, the cabin quiet except for the fire crackling nearby. His thumbs brushed her knuckles, unhurried, her breath caught. Then she stepped back abruptly, breaking the contact. Thanks, I've got it. He didn't push, just watched her, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. The rest of the day passed in fragments. Jen curled up on the sofa with a book she couldn't focus on. Evan moving around the cabin, always just within her awareness. They shared the couch at one point, a careful distance between them that somehow felt more intimate than closeness. Their knees brushed. Neither moved away. By evening, the storm had settled in earnest. Snow thick against the windows. The world reduced to white and wind. Evan lit the fire again, the glow filling the room with amber warmth. Jen looked up from her book to find him watching her, not staring, studying. "What?" she asked. He shrugged. "Nothing. Just didn't expect this trip to turn out like this." Her pulse jumped. Neither did I. The fire crackled between them, the cabin humming softly around them. Whatever irritation had been there before had shifted, morphed into something quieter, heavier. Curiosity, awareness, a spark neither of them seemed ready to name. And outside, the snow kept falling. The storm arrived fully sometime after dusk. Jen noticed it first in the way the light changed, how the last traces of daylight were swallowed by thick, swirling snow. The wind pressed against the cabin with growing insistence, rattling the windows, whistling through the eaves like a warning. There would be no leaving tomorrow. That thought settled heavily in her chest as she curled deeper into the sofa, book forgotten in her lap. The fire cast slow-moving shadows across the walls, the cabin glowing warm and sealed off from the world beyond. Evan moved quietly nearby, adding another log to the fire. He didn't ask if she was comfortable. He didn't hover. He just noticed. The blanket appeared beside her without comment, folded neatly, offered but not imposed. She hesitated only a second before pulling it over her legs. "Storm's supposed to last through the night," he said casually, sitting in the armchair across from her. "Maybe into tomorrow." She nodded. "Figures." Silence followed, not awkward, but weighted, charged. Jen tried to read. She really did. But every small sound pulled her attention away. The shift of Evan's weight in his chair, the quiet exhale of his breath, the scrape of his fingers along the armrest. When she reached to adjust the blanket, he did the same, both of them grabbing the edge at once. Their hands met. This time, neither pulled away immediately. His fingers were warm, steady. Her pulse skidded, breath catching before she could stop it. Evan looked at her then, not at her hand, but her face, his gaze darkening slightly, sharpening with something that felt dangerously close to hunger. "Sorry," he murmured, though his grip lingered a beat too long. "It's fine," she said, but her voice sounded thinner than she liked. They let go. The space between them seemed to shrink. Later, when the wind howled louder and the temperature dropped, the power flickered once, twice, then steadied again. Jen's heart jumped anyway. Evan was beside her instantly. "Hey," he said softly, "it's fine. Generator's solid." She hadn't realized she'd tensed until his hand settled briefly at her elbow, grounding, reassuring. She didn't pull away this time. "Thanks," she said quietly. They ended up on the sofa together after that, not touching at first, just closer than before. The blanket had migrated, draped loosely across both their laps, their legs brushing beneath it. Every movement felt magnified. When she shifted, her knee bumped his. When he leaned back, his arm stretched along the back of the couch, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from it. She was acutely aware of the option it presented, of how easy it would be to lean into him. She didn't, but she thought about it. The firelight softened his features, shadowing his jaw, catching in his eyes. He looked different like this, less smug, more intent, focused. "Do you always get cabins this remote?" she asked, more to fill the silence than out of curiosity. "Only when I want to disappear for a while," he said. That landed deeper than she expected. They sat like that for a long time, sharing the quiet, the storm, the warmth. When she reached for her mug, her fingers brushed his wrist again. This time his hand turned palm up, catching her fingers gently. Just for a second, her breath hitched. The contact felt deliberate now, intentional. Evan's thumb brushed lightly against the inside of her wrist, right where her pulse fluttered fast and undeniable. "Jen," he said quietly. Something in the way he said her name, lowered, careful, sent a slow heat unfurling through her chest. She looked at him. The moment stretched, the fire crackled, the storm roared. Then reluctantly, he released her hand. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, the hallway felt impossibly narrow. They brushed past each other, shoulders grazing, the contact lingering long after they separated. "Night," he said softly from his doorway. "Good night," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Jen lay awake long after the lights were out, listening to the storm and to the quiet, steady presence of Evan just beyond the wall. Every sound felt intimate, every breath close, and somewhere in the dark she knew the line they were walking was thinning, stretching, ready to snap. By the third evening, the cabin no longer felt like borrowed space. It felt shared. Jen noticed it in small, unsettling ways, how Evan no longer asked before adding another log to the fire, how she reached automatically for the mug he preferred when setting them out, how their movements had begun to anticipate each other without discussion. The storm hadn't let up. Snow pressed thick against the windows, muting the world beyond the glass, until the cabin felt suspended in its own quiet pocket of time. Evan made tea after dinner, the kettle humming softly. Jen sat at the table, watching him without quite meaning to. There was something unguarded about him tonight, less deliberate, more present. He handed her a mug, their fingers brushing again. This time, neither commented on it. They carried their drinks to the living room, settling by the fire. The couch seemed smaller than before, the distance between them negligible. Jen tucked her legs beneath her, blanket pulled up around her shoulders. Evan sat close enough that she could feel the heat of him through the fabric. A movie played quietly, forgotten, more than watched. Jen was aware of his arm along the back of the couch, the way his fingers flexed occasionally, as if resisting the urge to move. When she shifted, her thigh brushed his. The contact sent a slow, unmistakable wave of awareness through her body. She stilled, heart racing, unsure whether to pull away. Evan didn't move. Instead, Amy's hand drifted down, casual, unassuming, coming to rest on his own knee, too close to hers. The silence thickened. Jen swallowed, eyes fixed on the fire. "This is a bad idea," she murmured, though she wasn't sure what she meant by this. "Probably," Evan said quietly. But he didn't move away. She turned to look at him, and the expression she found there stole her breath. No smugness, no teasing, just restraint. Desire held carefully in check. "I don't want to make this uncomfortable," he added. Her laugh was soft, almost disbelieving. "It's already uncomfortable." His gaze flicked to her mouth. The moment stretched, taut as a drawn wire. Jen felt it then. The exact instant control slipped, not vanished, just loosened. She leaned in, barely, enough that his breath brushed her cheek, warm and steady, enough that the space between them disappeared. Evan froze, giving her the chance to pull back. She didn't. Their lips met softly, tentatively, more a question than a claim. The kiss was slow, careful, but it carried the full weight of everything they hadn't said. Jen's fingers curled into the fabric of his sweater. Evan exhaled against her mouth, deep and unsteady, before pulling back just slightly, forehead resting against hers. "Jen," he murmured, like a warning. Her pulse thundered. "I know." They sat there, foreheads touching, breaths tangled, the fire crackling inches away. His hand lifted, hesitating near her waist, stopping just short of contact. The restraint was almost worse than hunger. Eventually she leaned back, breaking the moment before it could tip too far. Her hands trembled faintly as she wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. Neither of them spoke for a long time after that. When they finally rose to go to bed, the hallway felt charged, every step deliberate. Evan paused outside her door, his hand resting briefly against the frame. "Good night," he said, voice roughened. "Good night," she replied. Jen closed the door and leaned against it, heart racing, lips still tingling from the memory of his. On the other side of the wall, Evan stood, motionless, jaw clenched, breath slow and controlled. The line had been crossed. Not completely, but enough that neither of them would sleep easily tonight. Sleep never came. Jen lay, staring at the ceiling, the quiet of the cabin louder than the storm outside. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt it again. The press of Evan's forehead against hers, the warmth of his breath, the way her name had sounded in his mouth. The line had been crossed. Not enough to satisfy, too much to ignore. She heard his door open. Soft footsteps moved down the narrow hallway, unhurried, unmistakable. Her breath caught as they stopped just outside her door. Silence stretched, then a quiet knock. Jen. Her name, low and careful, slipped through the wood like a touch. She sat up slowly, heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Evan. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and crossed the room, opening the door just enough to see him. He stood close, too close, his expression tight with restraint, eyes dark and intent. The hallway light caught the edge of his jaw, the tension there. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then she stepped back, opening the door fully. Evan followed her inside, closing the door softly behind him. The room felt smaller instantly, warmer, charged. They stood, facing each other, inches apart, breathing the same air. "This changes things," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. She looked up at him, searching for doubt, hesitation, anything that might slow this down. She found none. Jen reached for him first. This kiss wasn't tentative. It was slow, deliberate, full of everything they'd been holding back. His hands came to her waist, firm but reverent, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. She felt the steady strength of him, the heat, the undeniable reality of his desire. Her fingers slid into his hair, anchoring him as the kiss deepened. Not rushed, not desperate, but hungry in a controlled, intoxicating way. Evan broke the kiss just long enough to press his forehead to hers again, breath uneven. "Tell me to stop." She shook her head. That was surrender. They moved together instinctively, drawn by touch and warmth rather than urgency. His hands traced her back slowly, memorizing, learning. Every brush of skin felt amplified, electric. The world narrowed to sensation, the soft creak of the bed, the muffled roar of the storm, the warmth of his body surrounding hers. Time blurred, stretched, lost meaning. There was no rush, no frenzy, only closeness. Only the way he held her like she mattered, the way she fit against him, like she belonged there. Whispered words slipped between them, her name, his, quiet breaths and unguarded sounds. Every movement was deliberate, intimate, charged with trust. At some point, wrapped together beneath the blankets, the firelight from the other room flickering faintly across the walls, Jen realized the tension that had lived in her chest for days was finally gone. In its place was something heavier, deeper. Evan's arm tightened around her, protective, grounding. His lips brushed her temple, gentle now, unhurried, The storm outside had softened into a whisper, the snow falling in gentle waves against the windows. Inside, the cabin still held the heat of their earlier surrender. Every surface, every shadow, touched by the memory of what had passed. Jen lay against Evan, their limbs tangled beneath the blankets. Her head rested against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. It was a rhythm that had become familiar, grounding, intoxicating. She traced idle patterns over the fabric of his sweater, careful, hesitant, savoring the closeness. Evan's hand moved lightly along her back, slow, deliberate, not possessive, but claiming space without words. Every brush of skin sent shivers across her nerves, subtle but electric. He whispered her name once, softly, and she shivered in response. They spoke in murmurs. Fragments of conversation, soft laughter, quiet confessions that would have felt impossible hours before. I didn't think this would happen, Jen admitted, her voice a barely audible tremor. Neither did I, Evan said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But I knew I didn't want to stop it once it started. Her chest tightened. You could have, she whispered, though the idea felt absurd. He shook his head. Not when it felt like this. Not with you. The firelight flickered across the cabin, painting the walls in slow-moving shadows. Every movement, every brush of fingers, every shared warmth seemed magnified. It was a night of surrender, yes, but also a night of knowing, of recognition, of trust forming between them. Jen shifted slightly and Evan adjusted with her, arms moving instinctively to hold her in place, to offer support. The blanket had slipped to the floor somewhere in the night, but neither reached for it. It wasn't needed. Their bodies created enough warmth, their breathing synchronized, slow and steady. Jen found herself memorizing the curve of his jaw, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, the quiet strength in his hands. At some point, Evan's lips brushed against her temple, soft, reverent. "You're incredible," he murmured. Jen's heart skipped. She didn't respond with words. She couldn't. Instead, she pressed closer, letting herself exist entirely in the moment, in the sensation of him, in the surrender she had finally allowed. Minutes stretched like hours, and the night held them in a private, unbroken space. Each whisper, each sigh, each accidental brush of hands reinforced the bond that had formed in the firelight and snow. Eventually, exhaustion settled in. They stayed close, letting sleep come slowly, reluctantly, savoring the final moments of the night. The cabin outside was still, quiet, snow settling in soft layers. Inside, warmth lingered in their embrace, in their shared breath, in the electricity that had been set free and would not be forgotten. By the time the first hints of dawn filtered through the frosted windows, Jen and Evan were tangled together in a comfortable, intimate heap of limbs and warmth, neither fully awake, neither wanting to leave the cocoon they had created. It was a night that changed everything, an unspoken promise of desire, of connection, of attention that could not easily be released. And for one long, intoxicating night, nothing existed beyond the quiet rhythm of shared breath and the knowledge that they had crossed a line neither of them wanted to step back over. Sunlight crept slowly over the snow, painting the cabin walls in soft gold. Jen stirred beneath the blankets, warmth still clinging to her, Evan's arm draped lightly over her side. The room smelled of firewood, tea, and him, subtle, lingering, intoxicating. She blinked awake, heart still racing from the night before. The memory of surrender lingered, tender and electrifying, like a spark that refused to fade. For a moment she stayed still, savoring it, letting the quiet of the cabin wrap around her. Evan shifted, stirring beside her. He opened one eye and gave her a slow, lazy smile, the kind that made her chest tighten with an ache she hadn't expected. "Mornin'," he said, voice husky but soft. "Mornin'," she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. Her fingers brushed the blanket where it tangled with his arm, and for an instant neither of them moved away. The cabin was quiet except for the fire, low now, and the wind rattling the windows gently. Breakfast beckoned, but neither was in a rush. The storm had passed, leaving a pristine world of white outside, untouched and sparkling. When they finally moved, it was with ease and familiarity that hadn't existed before. Jen slid out of bed, wrapping herself in a robe, and Evan followed shortly, barefoot, hands tucked into the pockets of his pajama pants. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee that had cooled too long and bread toasted by the fire. Their morning was filled with small, intimate gestures, pouring coffee for each other, passing plates, shoulders brushing as they moved around the narrow space. Jen laughed quietly at something Evan said, and he responded with that slow smile that always seemed to unsettle her, soft and knowing. The fire crackled in the background as they finally settled by the living room window, mugs in hand. Evan reached over, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Jen caught his hand lightly in hers, holding it just long enough to savor the warmth, the touch. Neither spoke, but the contact said everything they couldn't, or didn't yet want to, put into words. Eventually reality crept back. Luggage had to be packed, jackets zipped, boots buckled. The cabin that had felt endless, intimate, and private would soon be just a memory. Jen lingered at the doorway, looking at Evan one last time, remembering the firelight, the storm, the way it had felt. "Guess this is it," she said, trying to sound casual. "Guess so," he replied, though his eyes betrayed the truth. They were both reluctant to leave what had happened inside these walls. They stepped outside into the cold sunlight, the snow crunching beneath their boots. The world beyond the cabin seemed too big, too loud, too ordinary. Yet between them there was something unmistakable, an unspoken bond, the heat of desire still simmering beneath polite smiles. Jen glanced at Evan, feeling a flutter of warmth despite the snow. "Until next time?" she asked softly, more a question than a promise. He smirked, just a little, confident and knowing. "Until next time," he agreed. And as they drove down the winding road, leaving the cabin behind, both Jen and Evan carried the memory of that snowbound night. The fire, the storm, the surrender lingering like embers, impossible to forget. The mountains, quiet and eternal, held their secret. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's story. Good night and sweet dreams.